Well, I know this is a delicate subject, and interesting enough, just this morning I ran into a young man, a young Turkish man, and he told me that, in fact, internet pornography is a significant problem among his generation. He just walked up to me and told me that, so perhaps this talk has its place. Now, the name of my talk is Eliminating Chronic Internet Porn Use Reveals Its Effects. And here's the thing, we can only know internet porn's effect on the user by having him stop porn use. And often it can take many months, maybe up to 2 years for a young man to fully experience the benefits. See, the studies on internet porn addiction, studies on internet addiction, they'll often correlate such conditions such as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, social anxiety disorder, depression, poor academic performance, poor socialization, many other conditions with internet porn addiction or internet addiction. And the common belief then is that social anxiety or ADHD or depression or many other emotional problems are the pre-existing conditions which lead to greater internet gaming or greater internet porn use. While this is true, my contention is that actually using internet porn, perhaps becoming addicted to porn, can lead to depression, can lead to social anxiety, can lead to many other conditions you wouldn't normally associate with internet porn use. And to begin this, I need to tell you a little story so that you'd understand why I have this belief. A strange thing happened about 10 years ago. My wife has a website, and it's not about porn, it's about relationships. And young men, not young men, about in their 20s and 30s, they started showing up on her website and started posting and saying, I have problems associated with my porn use. I have erectile dysfunction. I can no longer get excited by regular partners. Now, we were asking, what are you doing here? We don't want you here. But they were attracted because we had articles that had certain key words in them, such as sex and dopamine, etc., because the site had articles about the neurobiology of mating, bonding, falling in love. And Google, as it does, put together their posts, more showed up, and then over several years, they started to remove porn, started to quit porn in order to get over sexual problems, and these are some of the sexual problems that healed, such as chronic erectile dysfunction, the inability to orgasm, declining interest in real partners, and, oddly enough, they often escalated into porn that didn't match their real taste. Now, that can be explained, but what also occurred is that as the men gave up porn to cure sexual problems, they experienced other benefits that were quite unexpected. Their concentration improved, their grades at school improved, some of them went back to college. They had greater motivation, greater energy, they would go out and look for jobs. Social anxiety for a lot of them disappeared. In fact, some of them stopped taking their social anxiety medication. Some even stopped taking their medication for depression, or their moods improved. All of them pretty much wanted to be more social, wanted to get together with people and interact. And one of the most common benefits is that they experienced more emotions, they felt more. Prior, when they were using porn, they felt dead, emotionless. They couldn't connect with people. And one of the most other common ones is they viewed women differently, rather than as sex objects, which porn trained them to view women as. So many men asked us, why isn't this well known? Why isn't it known that porn can cause such diverse problems? Why isn't it known that porn can actually cause erectile dysfunction in healthy young men? Well, there was a huge gap between what they were being told on the internet and what they were experiencing. So I decided to create a website called yourbrainonporn.com in 2011. And what was interesting about this site is many other websites linked to it, thousands of other websites. So I've spent the last 6 years going back to these links and reading the posts, reading these threads on all these very different websites. And again, these men were complaining of the same problems and also describing the same benefits they experienced when they gave up porn. Soon, at the same time, many forums start to organically pop up around the web. These were non-religious porn recovery forums. They were created by young men, usually in their 20s, who were experiencing these problems. Some of them are very large. One in China has 2 million members. And so again, on these forums, we would read these stories, these recovery stories, and we would see the same problems, and we would see the healing, and then experiencing the same benefits. So the question is, I would have this question right now, isn't this just really a small percentage of young men? These are just a small percentage, right? Well, that's the obvious question. So I'm going to have a hypothesis. If porn-induced sexual problems are now widespread, as I suspect they are, we would also expect an increase in sexual dysfunction rates for young men. So what has happened over the last few years? Well, back in 2008, a French survey found that 20% of young men were not interested in sex. Now, if the French are not interested in sex, you know there's a problem. Japan. 36% of men ages 16 to 19 had no interest in sex. This was 2011. And that doubled in 2008. So the question is, what is the percentage in 2016? I suspect it's higher. What about studies? Well, look at this. This is shocking to me. Studies published between 1948 and 2002, all the studies, all the meta-studies, show that the normal rate for erectile dysfunction in men under 40 is 2 to 3%. 6 studies have been published since 2010, and the rates are now between 27 and 33% for men under 40. That's about a 1,000 increase in the last 15 years. What variable has changed in the last 15 years that could account for such an increase? I think it's porn, because I've observed men healing from it. Here's just a few, 2 of the 6 studies. This one's the most shocking. This was done, it's a Canadian study, on sexually active 16 to 21-year-olds. Now, I want to say something, it's normally those men who are not sexually active have a higher rate of sexual problems. So these rates might actually be low. 54% of men 16 to 21 reported sexual problems. That's higher than men over 70. Erectile dysfunction was 27%. Low sexual desire in teenagers, 24%. Inability to orgasm, 10%. Here's another study using the exact same questionnaire in the exact same place at 2 different times. The questionnaire in 2002 asked men ages 40 to 80 about their erectile dysfunction. 13% of the men 40 to 80 had that problem. Now let's go ahead, 12 years. Men ages 18 to 40, erectile dysfunction rates were up to 31%. Low sexual desire was 37%. So there is a problem with sexual problems. Here's the scary part for us, since we observe what goes on in these forums. Men 35 and older who did not grow up using internet porn, they often heal their sexual problems in maybe 6 weeks, 8 weeks, at the longest 12 weeks. And their healing is stable. They feel great, the problem never returns. However, what we have started to see in the last 3 years is that young men in their 20s who grew up using internet porn, especially those who grew up using what are called porn tube sites where you can stream videos, little clips, they often need 6 to 12 months to heal, sometimes 2 years. And they're often unstable. We're starting to see a few in the last year or two that we think will never heal, will never be normal. So why is that? Why can an older man who's old, who has less testosterone, who's 60 years old, be able to function normally in 6 weeks, yet a young man in his prime, healthy as can be, can never normally function with a woman? Well, it comes down to one thing: the adolescent brain. The adolescent brain is far more malleable than an adult brain. In fact, the purpose of adolescence for all mammals is to learn about sex so that the mammal, in this case humans, can successfully reproduce. So they have a very malleable brain which is making lots of connections and is getting rid of lots of connections so that it'll train itself to become aroused to what's in the environment. Well, the teenagers, the adolescents, are training their brain, molding their brain to become excited to screens, to become excited what's on the screen, to only get excited when they click from video to video, only when they have extreme novelty, only when they have a particular fetish. So when they get with a real person, that doesn't match the screen. It doesn't match what they've been training for. They've been training for the wrong sport. It's like training for soccer and then now you're going to try to play basketball. You're not so good. So in 10 years of observation, we are convinced that porn is behind the tremendous rise in youthful sexual problems. But we're also convinced that it's a major contributor to many of the emotional and mental problems that are seen in young people. And we're not alone. Here's psychiatrist Victoria Dunkley. She's been treating young people for psychiatric conditions for many, many years. And what she has discovered is that about 80% of her young patients are misdiagnosed, and that their problems are largely caused by computer use, interactive screens. Her solution is to abstain from electronic devices, and she sees that a lot of her patients recover from conditions as severe as bipolar disorder, severe depression, obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, you may ask, are there any studies that actually have porn users remove porn and observe the results? There are only 2 studies. These 2 studies had the porn users remove porn, actually try to remove porn, for only 3 weeks. These were not porn addicts. They were mild to moderate users. Yet both studies reported significant differences. One reported much greater commitment to partners after 3 weeks of trying to give up porn. And the latest one, 2015, they found that porn affected the brain. Because when they gave up porn for only 3 weeks, those that gave it up had much greater ability to delay gratification for future rewards. That means delaying gratification is one of the most important aspects of success in every part of your life. And again, these young men or people just tried to give up porn. They reduced it. What would happen if they gave it up for 3 months? So the whole point of my talk here is that we need studies. We need studies that remove porn for several months to discover what porn is causing. Because the problem is, and many people have had talks here, like Mark Griffiths and others, and it's obvious when you do correlation studies with internet gaming addiction or other types of internet disorders, you assume that someone has depression or social anxiety or some other disorder that leads to the use. But that's not always the case. The use is actually causing these disorders. And we need to look at this because we want to heal people. We want to avoid unnecessary suffering. We don't want to medicate people when they don't need it. Often the young men are being medicated for depression, anxiety, and of course, erectile dysfunction. And when we have those studies and they become better well known, we can then educate doctors and parents, and especially the young people, about the possible negative effects of porn or even internet use, and so they can monitor themselves and see if they're starting to feel more anxious, more depressed. And then they can quit. They can actually stop it and see if they get better. They can do their own experiments on themselves, just like these many men are doing on the forums. Thank you.